Can you actually put words to the kind of dragon that you're fighting? Is it communism?
It's the spirit of Cain. Yeah.
Can you elaborate?
Well,
what the spirit of Cain is?
So after Adam and Eve are thrown out of paradise for becoming self-conscious, or when they become self-conscious, they're destined to work. And the reason for that, as far as I can tell, is that to become self-conscious is to become aware of the future. It's to become aware of death. That certainly happens in the Adam and Eve story. To have the scales fall from your eyes. And then the consequence of that is that you now have to labor to prevent the catastrophes of the future. That's work. Work is sacrifice. Sacrifice of the present to the future. It's delay of gratification. It's maturity. It's sacrifice to something as well, and in the spirit of something. Okay, so now Adam and Eve have two children, Cain and Abel. So those are the first two people in history, because the Garden of Eden doesn't count. And they're the first two people who are born rather than created. So they're the first two people. And that's a hell of a story, because it's a story of fratricidal murder that degenerates into genocide, flood, and tyranny. So that's fun for the opening salvo of the story, let's say. And Abel and Cain both make sacrifices. And for some reason, Abel's sacrifices please God. It's not exactly clear why. And Cain's don't. Now, there's an implication in the text that it's because Cain's sacrifices are second rate. God says that Abel brings the finest to the sacrificial altar. He doesn't say that about Cain. So you could imagine that Cain is sacrificing away, but he's holding something in reserve. He's not all in. He's not bringing his best to the table. He's not offering his best to God. And so Abel thrives like mad. And everyone loves him. And he gets exactly what he needs and wants, exactly when he needs and wants it. He's favored of God. And Cain is bearing this terrible burden forward and working, and his sacrifices are rejected. So he gets resentful, really resentful enough to call God out and say something like, "This is quite the creation you've got going here. I'm breaking myself in half and nothing good's coming my way. What the hell's up with that?" And then there's Abel, the sun's shining on him every day. "How dare you?" It's like, okay, but this is God that Cain's talking to. And so God says what Cain least wants to hear, which is what God usually says to people. He says, "Look to your own devices. You're not making the sacrifices you should, and you know it." And then he says something even worse. He says, "Sin crouches at your door like a sexually aroused predatory animal, and you've invited it in to have your way, to have its way with you." And so he basically says, you have allowed your resentment to preoccupy yourself, and now you're brooding upon it and generating something creative, new, and awful, possessed by the spirit of resentment. And that's why you're in the miserable state you're in. So then Cain leaves. His countenance falls, as you might expect. And Cain leaves, and he's so incensed by this, because God has said, look, your problems are of your own making. And not only that, you invited them in. And not only that, you engaged in this creatively. And not only that, you're blaming it on me. And not only that, that's making you jealous of Abel, who's your actual idol and goal. And Cain, instead of changing, kills Abel.